Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Other Minds and Hands. This is episode number 115, and today Maggie and I return to Pride and Prejudice, having had a little diversion for a while to talk about some
Wonderful little break.
some Tolkien adaptation stuff. Really fun doing the paintings with Miriam last
Oh,
week.
that was so wonderful.
That was
And I feel
excellent.
like for both of us it was a nice like mental breath of fresh air too,
Hmm.
that this is the kind of stuff that I think we both get a lot of energy from.
Hmm.
So it was really fun to do that. So thank you, Miriam, for sharing that with us. And if you guys liked it, we would like to do more of that. So
Yes, we would.
yeah.
Yes, we would. Um,
Not just Miriam, we were just saying like it would be lovely to bring like John Howe back and
mhm.
any of the other Tolkien work that we have access to. Even the concept art. I feel like there's still so much stuff that we can just look at a piece
Yeah.
and develop some pretty good discussion about.
Yes. Yes. Agreed. Yeah, it's concept art is a lot of fun. I actually really like concept art. Um, but even just kind of thinking about that, thinking about, sorry,
Sorry,
concept
that was
art,
me.
like conceptually, is really interesting because it is, on the one hand, itself an adaptation, right? But it's also something that's going to be adapted
Yeah.
onto screen. So looking at the concept art, thinking about its relationship to the text, what the artist is working from, and then looking at the final film and comparing it back to the concept art.
Yes.
It's really
And
interesting to
and
kind of
how
think of that
different
as
that can
sequence.
and how different that can be from adaptation to adaptation. That
Yeah,
concept art goes through such a giant journey itself, from like first draft to final, and even final to screen. There can be such massive differences that I feel like
yeah.
that journey alone would be really cool to.
We should talk to Daniel Falconer about the
Mm,
concept art in general and like go through with him some interesting examples of and not just talking to Daniel in the sense of saying like, oh hey, what tell us stories about working on the films or something like that, but just sort of thinking about the idea of because I know that this is something I never really thought about before. Like I knew almost nothing about concept art and the role that it plays and how it works, and sort of seeing it would be interesting to look at some concrete examples, both like concept art to film
hmm.
examples, and also like book to concept art examples, and just be
Hmm.
kind of thinking and talking with a concept artist would be fun
And I
about
always
that.
like, yeah, the concept artist side of it. I always like the intention of just what is your journey like with this?
Hmm.
We're looking at the physical pieces, and analysis always naturally follows that. But talking to somebody about like their own understanding of what they're working on and how that kind of changes what they're able to bring into the art is it's just a really cool thing. And how many people are at the table? Like, did you picture this one on your own? And then
Hmm.
after you had a conversation with Peter Jackson, did it change? And then after
Right.
you had a conversation with the cinematographer, the costumer, the prop master, like, all those things,
Right.
it makes for
Yeah.
a pretty interesting journey.
Yeah, but that was a that's a tangent, but it's an
Yes.
interesting tangent that it would be interesting to pursue
Yeah.
moving forward. Today, we wanted to get back to Jane Austen. We want to get back to the Pride and Prejudice project, which we've been away from for a little bit now. Which means whenever I'm away from a project for a little bit, I'm always like, what did we do? What's
I
going
love
on?
that, like, Corey saying that. Like, I literally had no memory. I had to rewatch our last episode, and he's like, weren't we just at this point where so and so had just said this, that, and the other? I was like, this was weeks ago, and you remember the exact sentence we finished
I
on?
remember the last thing that we did, but
Corey,
I don't remember much of the.
how do
Okay,
you do that?
so yeah, so we're gonna yeah, Phil, exactly as Phil suggests, we're gonna start again from the beginning like Tolkien would when going back to begin some, well, not quite, I hope, but
We
what
need a
we
focal
need, yeah, yeah,
episode.
yeah, so let's focus on the purpose of this series, right? is to do serious analysis, but also to have this be a kind of example, right? I mean, we chose Jane Austen in large part because Jane Austen is a really there's really rich illustrations. Of course, there's many examples of adaptations of Jane Austen, which is one good reason to talk about it. Compared to which makes it very different in several ways from like The Lord of the Rings, right? In The Lord of the Rings, there's like the one dominant adaptation out there, which is so dominant that many people think of that instead of the book in many places, right? Like or it influences their memories of the book. So instead with Jane Austen, we have, tradition of like, decades, even centuries of adaptations that are already out there. And so it's kind of both a broader field, but it also just sort of changes the situation. There's Jane Austen's text, which has, survived in the midst of all of these adaptations that have gone on for years. So it makes it, and also, of course, as we said, it's less emotionally charged for a lot of people in the sense that even diehard Jane Austen fans, none of them believe that, the next adaptation, if it's bad, is going to ruin Jane Austen, because they know. Because Jane Austen is still around, and no matter what happens, right? You can do, even something as sort of like obviously sort of silly as Pride and Prejudice and zombies, and it's not going to do. Could you imagine somebody trying to do a Pride and Prejudice and zombies-esque adaptation of Tolkien and the extent to which people would lose their minds?
Oh God, I almost wonder though if it's so far left
Right.
field that people would be like, eh.
Right. Maybe it's less threatening than what they consider to be a bad one. But
Also, if and when we ever finish the Pride and Prejudice project, we should totally watch Pride and Prejudice and Zombies and
yes,
just
we
do like a
should.
compare and contrast.
Yes, it's an interesting. It would be an interesting discussion, actually.
Yeah, it would.
I think that there are, Oh, and it really kind of raises the general question of like parody, essentially.
Yeah.
And what
That's a whole other category we've never really brought up.
we've never really brought it. I mean, parody is a subspecies of adaptation,
Absolutely.
no question. Yeah. Anyway,
Another day.
Another day. I'm trying to introduce our discussions today, and I just keep coming up with ideas for new discussions we should have.
Okay. So what we want to do is get organized. Can't you tell?
Yeah,
we need to
get
focus.
organized. We need to focus and get organized. So,
But we do need a development meeting. So
we need a development
started
meeting.
talking off
So this
screen.
is our,
and we're like,
we
should
need
probably
to
broadcast.
we need to have a development meeting. So we're going to have a development meeting here. Okay. So let us renew the idea of this should not be. We need to make that the plan is to make this series accessible so that it can be used as a kind of introduction, right?
Introduction
to discussing adaptation.
To us and like what we do.
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't think we're gonna
to like the civil discussion of adaptation.
An even friendlier discussion of adaptation.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a really good case study for us to just say we want to be able to illustrate the kind of deep diving that we can do on an existing text and adaptation when there are less emotions involved.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so the plan is to do, and I don't remember what, because we had talked about the scope of this initial Pride and Prejudice series, and I don't remember. We had planned to do what, like a 6-episode discussion of these adaptations, right? Something like that.
I've got my episodes planned out. I think we've got 9.
9. Okay, right.
0 introduction episode, and then 1 through 9 looking at specific sections.
Right. Okay. 9. Okay, so wait, 8 episodes doing the analysis and no, 0 and then 9.
So episode 0 is the introduction.
Okay.
Do you want me to go through them?
So 10 total, right?
10 total.
10 total. Gotcha. Okay, 0 is the introduction. And then we did it by story beats. Right.
And then, yeah, so one is the opening and first ball. So basically what we've been talking
What we've
about
been
for the
talking about. Yeah.
past couple weeks.
Yeah.
Then the Netherfield ball. Then meeting Lady Catherine. Then Darcy's first proposal and rejection. Then Darcy's letter to Lizzie. Then Toreen Pemberley. Then Jane's letters about Lydia and Wickham.
Hmm.
Then Lady Catherine de Bourgh's visit to Lizzie.
Yeah.
And the closing.
Right. Okay. Good story
No
beats.
problem.
Those make sense.
Yeah.
Those make
They're
sense.
solid.
No solid. No problems. Okay. So one thing that I'm actually kind of thinking I might want to change. Not well. So we were doing the analysis of the films because we were like, let's go ahead and start with number 1, and we'll come back and do episode 0 afterwards. I'm wondering. I think I want to change that. And here's the reason I want to change that, because I keep finding myself, when thinking about episode 1 stuff, basically wanting to segue into intro material. Like I think it might be easier for me to move forward with like, what are we going to say and how are we going to approach the analysis if we first lay the groundwork of, because it's not only just going to be introduction to adaptation. There will be some basic vocabulary we'll want to introduce and some basic discussions that we'll want to have.
And know that we've already covered it, because I can see us being like,
That's
oh, we'll
my
cover
problem.
that.
That's my problem. Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if we end up reshooting the first one, much
Yeah.
like you rewrite the introduction before you submit, a final paper kind of a thing. But
Yeah.
this is basically like the rough draft of our abstract that we need to get out there in the
Right.
world.
Yeah, and
So, I agree.
and an introduction. I mean, I like, most sensible people tend to write introductions last, but that's when you're really just trying to you're trying to segue into the thing, but so you want to have the thing first so that you know what you're segueing into. But this is not that sort of an intro, though. This is really laying groundwork and establishing parameters, which it would be really good to know if we can, if we can build on them.
Yep. Right. I'm jotting this down.
Yeah. Yeah, Karen says it was hard doing a summary because of that mix of discussion and overview. Yeah, exactly. I keep coming back to it, right? I keep coming back to thinking about the techniques, right? Thinking about what we learn. Even just wanting to draw attention to, like, look how, like, they do this. And it would, and again, we can do that. We'll be giving them, we'll be giving lots of examples of that, but to have the guardrails in place first, in a sense. So did we have notes about what we wanted to do
Roughly.
in session 0?
Yeah, it's on this Other Minds and Hands planning document, but we can start from this, I think.
Okay. Here, let me see. The one we were looking at before? Or no, that was the episode 1.
It starts with OMH, Pride and Prejudice planning, beat mapping.
Okay, it is that document.
And
Okay,
if
I
you
think I've
scroll
got
halfway down
document.
that first page,
Yep.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Episode 1 introduction. Okay.
And I'm already like, I don't know, there's so many more things. If you scroll farther down, I think what we started with is what we started with a few weeks ago. And then scroll farther down.
Intro ball, yeah.
That second page, and there's a much bigger list of things that I think we listed out.
Oh, wow, yeah, look at all these things.
Uh-huh.
It's a lot of things.
Are you sharing your screen so they can see
I
it?
am, yeah.
Okay, sorry, I'm only on my laptop, so I've just got the one screen. But yeah, so you guys can see, like, what we got into.
Okay, oh, and then you've got these terms down at the bottom. The, like, vocabulary down on, like, page 8 or something.
Let's add some page numbers.
Just go all the way down at the bottom.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting.
I mean, that's...
We can come back to some of these things.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the theory stuff I don't think we need to really dig into, but the early stuff is stuff you've heard me say a million times, but needs to be in an intro episode.
Hmm.
Fidelity, elision, interpolation, close adaptation, loose adaptation, intermediate. Those are key.
Yeah, yeah. I still. So it's okay. Here's a problem I have. A
Okay.
problem I have is that close adaptation and loose adaptation are definitely common terms. Like, it's
Yeah.
important to know those terms. On the other hand, I don't like them very much. Like,
Okay.
I think they're sloppy as terms. Because, like, part of the premise is, in part, like, I feel like one of the things that I learned is that, like, close adaptation is not, and, like, not to mention that close and loose, there's a lot of subjectivity there, right?
Yes.
I mean, like, I would consider the Lord of the Rings, the Peter Jackson films, a loose adaptation. Like, it's pretty loose as far as I could see, right? Like, 'cause it would depend on your standards,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. I'm like, but to most people that
It's
would
a
be
close
quite
adaptation. Yeah.
close adaptation, because a loose adaptation would be setting it in the modern day with
But see,
cars
to me,
and
that's a
you know,
totally
like
different thing. Like, that's a
yeah,
total. That's not even. That's. I mean, so because there's a qualitative. So, like, if you take, like, again, let's do the go back on safe ground, right? Thinking of, like, a Shakespeare adaptation or something,
yeah,
right? Uh, the movie is a loose adaptation of, but it's not just a loose adaptation. Like, it's doing something different
yeah.
than an adaptation, which is just changing lines, right? But it
And
could change lines.
the Baz Luhrmann Romeo and Juliet is a close adaptation because it's word for word the original text. It doesn't matter that there's cars and guns. That is a close
Exactly.
adaptation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, like, so it's not just that close and loose is subjective, which it is,
Yeah.
right? And so they don't feel, for that reason, because of the subjectivity involved there, it doesn't feel to me like a useful distinction, because it's not a universally agreed upon distinction. It's not a useful label in that way. And the other thing is that it blurs, because those two questions, like, how close does it stay to the text of the original, and are you taking the story and are you transplanting it in another way, right? Like, are you writing, 10 Things I Hate About You, or
Right.
are you writing Clueless?
Clueless.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Clueless is, it's more than just a loose adaptation of Emma, right? It's a transposition. It's doing
Yes.
something fundamental. You're attempting something totally different than another adaptation, which would be called a loose adaptation, right? Those are the reasons why I find them unsatisfactory as
I think
labels.
that's important to bring out though,
Yeah,
because whenever you go to like Adaptation Theory 101, you get these definitions.
yeah,
And that's fine to memorize the single line, but there's not a lot of give for nuance in there.
hmm,
And the whole study of adaptation, I think we've decided, is incredibly nuanced.
yeah,
So, being able to bring some of that mindset into these very seemingly clear black and white definitions makes a lot of sense to me. Like, we've had so many conversations about terminology of adaptation being problematic, and we might as well start at what everybody agrees on
yeah.
because it's not actually agreeable,
No, it's really not.
It's not that simple.
Because I agree with Karen. I would be receptive to an argument that said Clueless is a close adaptation of Emma. Because it is a close adaptation. I mean, like, beat for beat, all the way through. Like, it's a very attentive and close adaptation. You could say, I think I could make an argument that Clueless is closer to the text of Emma than many close adaptations, right, have been, actually. Anyway, yeah. So we can definitely talk about this. This is kind of a confession I've been holding back for a long time, because, like, I don't want to just stir the pot, and I don't also just want to be that guy who's like, no, I always have to have my own unique vocabulary about everything. It's just that I think that there's a lot of accepted vocabulary is not really
Yeah.
very satisfactory or helpful.
But I think that very clearly states that in our introduction episode, there needs to be a little bit of a discussion about terminology.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
in the study of adaptation, here are some terms that you will often hear. This is what these things loosely mean. However, know that there can be a lot of nuance within this because da 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 and all the things that we've talked about. So,
Yeah.
having a short paragraph to kind of give a disclaimer that it's not as clear as you think it is, and that's okay. We're
Yeah.
all going to be on this journey
We're all
together,
gonna,
you know?
we're all gonna be figuring it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Uh, yes. Yes. And I still think that the categories, I think that the categories that we came up with before, like ages ago, like years ago, are more useful labels. Right, we talked about like direct adaptations, fill in the blanks adaptations, and
Transposition.
or modulation. Yeah,
Hmm.
because those are clear. Those are objective categories, right? That's clear, and it's about what it is that you're trying. They are a description of the particular creative project you are undertaking, and they're fundamentally different kinds of creative projects.
But
Are
it's actually referring to the process. Yeah,
Yes,
that makes a lot more sense.
yeah, yeah. Because yeah, how close it is more tells us more about you than it tells us about the film. Like it tells what your standards are for closeness. Yeah, and I will confess, I would at least concede that the Peter Jackson films are attempting to be a close adaptation.
Okay.
It's this, again, like I, yeah, my own standards have changed in a lot of ways. But yeah.
I think that's a really good point to bring up, like, and it doesn't have to be hammered home or argued. It's very much a stance of we don't need to assign this element to it because you define close differently than I define close.
Yeah.
So therefore it's not super helpful.
Right.
So let's take a look at this one instead because we
Right.
think this one actually might be a little bit more helpful to have us be able to discuss this analytically.
And it does help also to frame what we're doing in this series because we're looking at direct adaptations, right?
Hmm.
That's the so like how close, how loose they are is one thing. But they're both direct we're definitely comparing apples to apples,
Yes.
in doing that. Whereas, again, to go back to Tolkien for a second, to compare the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings films and the Rings of Power and
Right.
say which one is closer to the text is not to compare apples to apples because they're
No.
not both direct adaptation. Well, they're doing fundamentally different. One is a direct adaptation, one is a fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
So you just can't put them side by side and ask those same exact questions about them.
Right. You can change the questions. We can
Sure.
talk about depictions of Middle Earth in
Yeah.
these
Oh,
two.
absolutely.
Sure. Like there's
Absolutely.
different ways that we can compare them and have them be a
And they're
similar
both still
platform.
adaptations. They're both
Yeah.
related to the original, and you can look at their relations and you can compare their relations to each other. But you have to begin with the recognition that they're doing different things.
Sorry, somebody's pushing me off the sofa. I'll give you two guesses who that is. Merlin the dog is now taking up the entire sofa to the point that I'm going to move to a different chair.
Yeah.
Dogs, man.
It's like how my tiny little Shih Tzu manages to take up like 75% of the king size bed. Yeah.
I mean, he is a big dog, but he started curled up next to me on this little cuddle chair, and now he's like, okay, much like the spread of an adaptation. No.
Okay.
So
All right.
terminology is something we definitely need to discuss
Yes.
in episode 1. Let's try to get these like header points.
Agreed.
Terminology,
Terminology. Yeah.
clear existing definitions so we can at least acknowledge that we know the familiar theoretical terminology,
Right.
but then our kind of new definitions and why we're going to be utilizing these, and we're not going to focus so much on that. So I think like a little discussion of terminology and definitions,
Yeah.
definitely.
Terminology and definitions.
Why we picked this book.
Why we picked this book? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, the reason Pride and Prejudice makes such a great case study for adaptation. We spent some time, I know, before talking about context and wanting to make sure that we are factoring in how when we think about, because that is only fair. Like thinking about the difference between the American feature film and the BBC miniseries, and how, although from a purely adaptation, from a like relationship with the story perspective, on the one sense I can say, as I just did, that we're comparing apples to apples there, the two things are not the same thing. And so we're going to see many differences between them that have more to do with the different genre, essentially, because you could call that a generic difference between like a miniseries and a feature film. It's a formal difference, I guess. It's structure. I mean, you're producing a different thing. It's like if you were to do it the other way around, right? It would be like saying, okay, you've got a movie, do a novelization of that movie, or one person do a novelization of the movie and another person write a short story about the movie, and then we'll compare those two, right? You can, I mean, you'll still be able to see interesting relationships. By the way, since today's sub theme is throwing out random ideas for stuff that we shouldn't do, we still need to do that. We still need to look at adaptation the other way around. We should talk to Una about novelizations.
Oh yeah.
Because like doing a print adaptation of a film is.
I'm like, I will start the message to her right now, because otherwise I won't remember.
Yes.
Got it. I won't hit send yet, because she'll be like, "What novelizations?" Like, don't worry about it, Una. Message me in an hour. I'll tell you what we meant.
Yes.
If you guys don't know her, she's a Star Trek writer and part of our core community for Tolkien, and just brilliant. So she would be a lot of fun to talk to about that.
She'd be great. Yeah. And again, it's fair to discuss it the other direction, right? Anyhow, okay, so that's one thing that we wanted to talk about the Pride and Prejudice one, to look at the context for the two productions and make sure that we are understanding that. And I think that would be really useful to talk about in the episode 0, because then it will enable us just to nod to it, right? We can just acknowledge, like, okay, so one obvious factor for how these two adaptations handled this scene differently is that, for one, it was the culmination of one episode, right, in the miniseries, and for the other, it was a scene that takes place, 10 minutes into, a 2-hour film. So
yeah, I was thinking that about setting the scene. So like, we'll talk about why we did Pride and Prejudice, but then I think we'll also, like, I think we've got a little note here about setting expectations. So yeah, we will explain we're looking at a 6-part miniseries as well as a feature-length film as well as a novel. So like, we are taking a look at 3 separate versions of a similar story, and that's not really fair because we're not comparing apples to apples, but we are trying to focus in on singular beats that exist in these adaptations.
Yeah.
So we're not trying to say, like, look at this paragraph and how it's transposed.
Right.
We're taking a look at this idea and how is it communicated.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. As I say, this is something that I can imagine coming up, and we will have wanted to have discussed this. And Karen was reminding us, of course, also, we discussed, and I remember discussing the differences between a U.S. and British production. Like, it's not just a miniseries; it's a BBC miniseries, right?
Right, and the expectation that would have.
Yeah, and therefore the different audiences. This is something that you and I were immediately noticing. We talked about this when we were analyzing that opening shot in the Wright production, in the film, and the relationship with Lizzie that we have. I still find it so striking. That the opening scene of the BBC one is with the camera positioned essentially from Lizzie's perspective. And we only then find out at the end that it was from Lizzie's perspective the whole time. At the end of that sequence, I mean. And the opening scene of the... Wright? Isn't that his name? The director?
Yeah, Joe Wright.
Joe Wright. The opening scene of the Joe Wright film is us looking straight at Lizzie, right, with the
Yeah.
book in between us.
Watching from afar.
Watching,
Yeah.
yeah. First we get that,
Separate.
we get that landscape scene, right, and then the first shot that we get after the landscape scene is, and we get nobody watching the landscape scene, right, and then so it's just it's literally a 180-degree difference, right,
Yeah.
between the perspectives there, and that's really interesting, and that's anyway, yeah, but.
But I think you're hitting on one of the frameworks that we can use to discuss this. So episode one, we're hitting some of those beats. I think there's another conversation that will come out of these development chats that'll be like the framework for each episode.
Yes.
So if the framework for each episode is camera angles and perspective and storytelling,
Yes.
great. There's a wonderful header of how are we shown this scene?
Yes.
Where are we in relation to the characters? How does that tell us what's going on? That's a pretty important storytelling device. So I like that, like camera perspective, costuming, light, all that stuff that we've talked about, time of day, time of year, like all that stuff comes up.
Yeah.
Scene setting.
Yes. And I remember one of the other things that we were going to do in that first episode was try to not just discuss, but illustrate with some concrete analysis storytelling, but like how storytelling works. What is the difference between narrative storytelling in text form and narrative storytelling in film form? And that's totally different from the question of like, there's a difference between the two films because one is a miniseries and one is a feature film, but they are very similar. In just as a short story and a novel are two different scopes of story, but they're still using narrative
Language
in the
to
same
tell a
way,
story.
right? Like it's you're
They still have the same like media.
yeah,
in
you
which
can't
to
do the same
utilize.
thing. The stories are different, but yes, you still have the same tools at your disposal. It's
Yeah.
still something
Yeah.
that you're writing in words and someone is going to read. And so in that way, when we talk about storytelling, we really can take the two film adaptations together and we can, hey, for the sake of nomenclature consistency, it would really help me. I always stumble when I refer to the miniseries as a film.
Okay.
So I want to establish a piece of vocabulary. When we say film, we mean any
Joe Wright.
visual. No, we mean everything.
Oh.
I want to have the two genre categories be miniseries and movie. And when we talk about film, we were
Anything
talking
that's
about film versus text.
Oof.
Does that make sense?
Okay.
Because
It makes sense, but I have to
I want a
wrap my
word
head
that I
around
can
that.
use, like to be like film storytelling and textual storytelling.
Can we just say visual storytelling?
We can, and that would work in this case, though not when we want to do paintings or something.
Paintings. Yeah.
We could. I mean, we could.
No, I'm
It would work
thinking
for
like
this
big,
project.
and I'm thinking big picture, like standard terminology. Like, yes, we would absolutely say visual storytelling, but you're right. We are going to discuss visual storytelling in many different ways.
And not
So,
only that, but we're also going to be talking about non-visual elements like soundtrack.
yeah,
So it's not totally visual.
I'm going to sit with that. I don't see it. I'm not disagreeing in any way. I want to make sure that's our
Because
best
we do
option.
generically use the word film to describe
Yeah.
like a TV show. I always had this problem with TV shows. And because film and movie are sort of synonymous, but I want a simple word that I can like put them all in one bucket because they are, again, they're different from each other, but they're different from each other like novels or short stories or even poetry are different from each other, but they are still part of one thing compared to like movies and films and videos.
Yeah. I've seen all of our suggestions. Filmed, yeah, I mean, that's the action of it. Screen, I don't think is going to work as well. Video is definitely not going to work. Video used to be okay, but now it's either dated or it's only referring to an internet video. So,
Right. Yeah.
Talkie. Thanks. We're going way back now.
That discriminates against silent films. Then we can never do Nosferatu.
Let's stick with film for now.
Okay.
But I think maybe we just work on getting a little more comfortable with having the film, the miniseries, the novel as our three separations.
Well, but
and we've got the filmed content and the written content.
Yeah. So it's text versus film are the two big categories I would want to use. I think that's true. I mean, we can do, of course, we can do that thing that literature people love to do, which is call everything a text, right? But that obscures exactly the differences that I'm trying to do. So, like, yes. I don't want to do that. I want a word, and I'm comfortable with text to describe, Austen's text. Because whether it's a book, whether it's an ebook, whatever, like it's words written that you're reading, right?
Yep.
Yes. And yes, I will accept, by the way, as a little side note, that audiobooks are, in a sense, adaptations. And so, there is a mediator between you and the text. So it's not the same experience.
Right. You're getting their emotion, their interpretations.
Yes. Sure. Yeah. There's adaptation involved in all audiobooks. But do want to talk about your close adaptations though. There you go. That's my definition of a close adaptation. An unabridged audiobook is my definition of a close adaptation.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair. But that's what Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet is, just with some visuals.
Sure, there you go. Yeah.
But you can see why we get distracted by all these different ideas. And I'm looking at Phil's comments, where would you put web series? And where would we put animation? Where would we put... There's so many different... Let's try not to get too lost in the weeds.
No.
I think in our terminology section, we acknowledge these problems, and we come up with what...
I think for the purposes that I'm describing, I don't see any problems with any of that.
Yeah.
Animation included. Animation, is it very different from, a realistic feature film? Of course it is. But so is poetry very different from a novel, right? So like a sonnet is very different from a novel. So I'm willing to include all forms of writing within my category of text if we can include all forms of, these audio-visual adaptations into my category of film.
Yeah, I think Phil, generally textual versus visual is
Except there are non-visual elements. That's what I don't like about that.
Right.
And there are other things that are visual that are not that. So it's
Yes, Corey. Yeah, so it's just a little too limiting.
A little too limiting. But film, I know it's different because we don't normally put an animated web series into the category of film. That's...
Oh, I do.
Do we?
Sure.
Oh, great. Then no problems.
Yeah.
Film it is.
Yeah. When you think about Best Picture, that can mean everything. That's animated, that's feature, that's shot on film, that's digitally made, whatever. I think it's fine for all that to fall into the same category. We'll just have to clarify what we're referring to in these instances. So as long as we clarify our terms,
sure,
I think that's fine.
Okay. So it would be okay for me to confidently, without doubting myself every time I open my mouth to say it, to say the book and the films, the text and the films.
Yes.
And we can talk about textual storytelling versus film storytelling.
As long as we clarify first, we know that this is a feature film and a miniseries, but we're going to refer to both as films because they are filmed pieces of art.
And when we do want to specify, because they are different genres, right? The miniseries, we can call it a movie instead of a film, because that way we're not reusing this, we're not repurposing the same word for a different meaning. If we're going to use it, we should use it consistently.
I'm going to balk on that.
You don't like that?
I don't know. It's going against my terminology, right? I'll have to rethink that. Movie and film are two separate things for me too.
But isn't wasn't the Joe Wright film? Wasn't that a movie?
Yes, but it's also a film.
See, now this is interesting because
I
in my
know.
world, those two things are synonyms.
They were until I moved here. And then it's
Ah,
like everybody, you go to see a film at the cinema. You don't go to see a movie at the movie theater. You go to see a film at the cinema. Saw a good film the other day. So like there's a terminology comfort level with the word film that
you
I've
think is
attached
it like an
to a
American
cinematic
Brit
event.
thing then?
I wonder if it is like,
That
and
like they
now
just
I
don't
like
use
have
the word movie over there so
and now I
much?
have my like own personal separation of like a movie is like a popcorn eating entertainment. A film is
Right.
like a piece of art, right? Like,
Sure. Sure.
sometimes you just want to go watch a movie.
Yeah.
Other times I really want to watch a film. Like, that's my own weird definition of that.
No,
But
I do acknowledge. I mean, I am aware of that distinction, um, but I have
but
to
that's
admit
that's
that's
conversational. That's not
yeah,
definition
and it's the
in
kind of
analysis.
definition I always want to push back on, right?
Yeah.
Because I like if it's a matter of what essentially personal taste. It's more than just taste. Like I consider this great art. But this is my problem. Like I dislike criticism in almost all of its forms. Like classic criticism. Like I don't like people telling me like what is or is not art. I'm not saying I always disagree with people, right? And I'm not saying
Just
that I
you
consider
don't have the
everything
right to
equally
tell me what that
artistic,
is.
but I always get
Totally.
I always
Yeah.
get twitchy when people are like, "Oh, well, that's not a film." I'm always like, "Well, I'm going to fight you on that. I don't like
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
but I
yeah.
don't like that movie, but I'm going to fight you on that." It makes me feel like fighting when people say things
Yeah,
like
well,
that.
and I remember like when people first started calling it film to me, I was like, "Ooh, aren't you snooty?"
Yes,
Like
there's a
there does
snoot
seem to
element,
be this like,
and I
there's
have
no
to
need
admit,
for
like
that. Yeah, it's just a general terminology.
I
So
have
again, we can acknowledge problems with language as long as we clarify what we're going to say. So
I have many failings. One of my failings is that snootiness makes me twitch. Like
what
I
are you
get,
talking
and like
about?
the older I get, the worse it gets. Actually, like
I don't think it's not twitch so much as it is shake vigorously.
oh,
Like,
like it, I get like elitism really bothers me, and
yeah, and
yeah,
I really start to shut down. The more like you might want to argue it, which is very good of you to want to engage in those conversations. I tend to go, I don't need to have this with you.
well,
I
that's I've gained more of that sort of wisdom as I've gotten older. I used to have no discretion whatsoever when it came to those things, but yeah, no, um, I think that's part of the reason why I do feel the difference between film and movie. Like movie feels low class. The word it feels like it
but
feels
even you
lowbrow.
saying that makes me go, but it's
I
not.
know,
Movies can
right?
be
I
brilliant.
know, right?
Yeah.
It's like I acknowledge there's a highbrow lowbrow distinction between the not the
Yeah.
film and movie, but I want to use it like that makes me want to use it knowing that. Like it
Yeah.
makes me stubbornly want to insist upon it. But
I'm gonna struggle calling it the Joe Wright movie. That's all. Like it's the Joe Wright
because you
film.
feel like you're insulting it.
I don't know, or if it's it just feels wrong to me.
Right.
Like it's just that's not I don't think I'm insulting it. It just feels like that's the wrong term. But I'm not entirely sure what that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, Karen movie just feels American to me.
Well,
Maybe.
see, Karen, I was wondering about that. I was wondering
Mm.
about that. If that would be, because I mean, movie certainly sounds like an American word. Though that's an interesting distinction too,
I
because there are
know. It's
all
like, oh,
kinds of
Corey,
British
there's a
words.
statement.
Well, it feels like an American word, but then again, there's so many British words that are really silly. Um. Anyway, yeah.
We're doing a great job of focusing our
No,
outline.
this is good.
Okay.
This is good.
This
Well,
is necessary
we're
though.
establishing some vocabulary. The vocabulary is important because again, we should be consistent. We should be consistent, and it's gonna create a problem if we use the word film as the category into which we put both of these films, but then we call one of them a film and the other one not a film.
Yeah.
Like that's just confusing.
I think we're getting a little too in the weeds, but maybe we're not. But like Why do we need to do that? Can we not just call it the miniseries and the film?
We can't, because I want I want to talk about text storytelling and film storytelling. I want to
And
talk
visual
about like
storytelling.
the thing that they have in common.
Yep.
And of course, one of the things that they have in common is that it's more than just visual. It's auditory as well. Which, it's mostly visual. Like it's a
It
lot
is,
of
but I
visual.
see what you're saying. Yeah.
I mean,
Let's
it would
say
if we
film.
said visual, then not only do we have the problem with paintings, but also we have the problem, the slightly silly problem that we will have created for ourselves when we're setting like one of the tools that the visual adaptations have is sound. As long as we're prepared to be silly in that way, we could do it.
I'm jotting down. So, like, I'm thinking text adaptations versus filmed adaptations. We know that this is usually referred to as visual adaptations, but we're taking into account that there are other elements that the word visual doesn't cover, like sound.
Like
So,
sound,
we're going to call them filmed.
filmed with a
Can we do
okay. We
that?
can do the uh,
The verb.
yeah. Just make it participial. Why not? Um, we could things like web cartoons wouldn't seem to fit so comfortably in that category. I mean, I'd put them there still. Like I still would put them all in
Mm,
the same category, but um,
yeah.
because the problem with making it participial is then you're talking about the action of filming,
Action.
right? Um, which is most all of them have in common. Animations don't exactly in
No,
the
I see
same
what you're
way.
saying. We want to stick to as much clarity as we can for the actual item. So we're trying to define the specific item, and film probably is the most catch-all that we can use.
I can't think of a better way, a better word
E-
than filmed.
Sometimes we just have to talk around and around till something
Yeah,
makes sense.
yeah. Um,
Okay.
Videographic kind of works.
Mm.
Uh,
I just think VFX with that.
right. Because videography is a subset of what happens in the filmmaking process, right?
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
kind of the way you're thinking of that? Yeah. Yeah. Um,
All right. I think we stick with film for now. I'm going to put a little star next to it just to make sure that it feels right.
because we're good, we're both going to call the Joe Wright film a film
Of
at some
course we
point. And so like if it involves us having to discipline ourselves in that way, we might not it might not be worth it. Um,
Yeah, because you don't want to go against something that's natural. What we want to be able to do is explain why we call it what we call it and have it make sense to everybody else too. So
let's
that
do it the
takes
other way
some
around. So
self-examination.
let's use the word film generically. Um, as long as I can be confident and comfortable talking about the BBC as a film as well. That's the other thing that I always pause. I'm like, it's a show technically, but it's um, if I as long as we're comfortable with me calling that a film, when we are focused on the genre distinctions between the Joe
Mhm.
Wright and the BBC, then um, we can talk about there. I could talk movie versus miniseries, um,
Film versus miniseries.
but not if I'm calling them both films all the
I
time. I'm like if I say the
know.
BBC film, but it's not a film, of course. That makes no sense. Like that's exactly the thing we can't
I
do.
mean, in some respects, of course, you can call it a film because it is a single narrative over many hours. It has a beginning, middle, and end. It has a singular arc. Like it is a standalone film. Most of us watched it on DVDs, VHS,
Yeah,
from beginning to end.
yeah,
Like I didn't watch it live on TV, so it has no TV attachment to me. It
right.
was always a
Well,
standalone
it
piece
was
that you
made
could
for the TV, but yeah,
rent
yeah.
from Blockbuster.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a distinction. But miniseries separates it pretty substantially from what a film is to me. A film is a 2 hour set, give or take half hour, storyline with beats, with structure, with breakdowns. And a miniseries doesn't adhere to that, or it does, but over a much wider span. So
Mm-hmm.
just having the terminology is a really easy separation in my brain. But we can't do that with these rules.
We can, again, so long as we have the problem is you're resistant to calling
Yep.
the Joe Wright thing anything other than a film.
Yeah.
If they're both films, but one is a
But if I
miniseries and one is a
but if I'm
movie.
allowed to make a joke in the first episode and say, I struggle calling this a movie, but for the sake of clarity, we're gonna call this the Joe Wright movie.
Kind of, it hurts you. I can see
A little
that it's
bit.
painful. Yeah. No, and again, I get it. Like I get it. There is it.
But it's not painful in terms of like, I don't know, it just feels like the wrong term. Like it doesn't feel like I'm thinking less of it. I don't think it's a qualifying thing. It's more of just but it's a film. Why would I call it a movie? I'll get over it, guys. Let's put a pin in that. Moving on.
No, it's okay. So this all came up because I was talking about text storytelling and film storytelling as one of the major things that we wanted to focus on here.
Yes.
Because, and I think we get into this by talking about faithfulness and change, right? Why do films always change the story? Why do they always make changes from the book? When you do scene by scene comparisons, it's never exactly the same. Why do they make changes? And because this is I think a major thing we need to address right away, because of course one of the problems that I think that people have when watching adaptations or discussing adaptation is a largely unexamined, completely false assumption that a faithful adaptation that changes nothing is possible.
Right. Or positive.
Right. Is either a good thing or even a possible thing.
Yes.
And we are not, one of the goals is not to say, hey, everybody, you just need to give more license to people to mess with the books that you love. Like, that's not the message. The message is you need to understand the kind of storytelling that's going on. One comparison that I don't know if we'd have time to do like an analogy, but of course, the translation from one language to another is one sort of analogy, right? Do you think that would be a good way to get into like looking at the different storytelling forms, to say like they really are different languages, different storytelling languages that books have versus films have? It's not a perfect metaphor,
Yeah.
but it is. I bring it up because to my mind, saying, the adaptation should be like oh, you should just keep the script, right, the dialogue from the book, all of it word for word in the movie, and just like make a movie with the dialogue, especially if somebody, by the way, like Jane Austen, whose dialogue is amazing, right, and such a huge portion, like such a big percentage of the book is her dialogue. So with Jane Austen, it's another thing that makes Jane Austen a really interesting example, right? You'd think if there were any author that you could do that kind of an adaptation, like we're just going to take the dialogue from the book and we're going to put it on screen. And that's the script, right? We don't even need to write the script, right? Script's already written, right? We're just gonna do it. Again, you'd think Jane Austen would be like one of the best authors to try to do that with, and yet that is not possible. Right. And it's really not possible. It's not only that it wouldn't be good, it's really not possible. Just like it's impossible to take a book in one language and translate it into another language and have it be exactly the same thing and not change anything. You can't do it.
Yeah, I'm like I don't know if I want to get into foreign language adaptations because
Yeah.
that is like a whole other category, but a really interesting one. But I
Yeah.
think your first example
It might
is
not
a
be very
really,
helpful.
yeah, it might be a little, getting us lost a bit more. But
Yeah.
like your first example, I think is a really good thing to illustrate because when people start to get up in arms and emotional about these unfaithful adaptations, that's what I want to do. Like, I
Hmm.
want to just stage a table reading where people just read the direct dialogue from the text and have them see that that falls really flat and it doesn't really work. So, what's the difference? What do we need to do? Oh, we need to do this. Aha, we are adapting. Here's how this works.
Right.
And you turn it into more of a workshop. So, if we're able to kind of get that kind of vibe in a brief little introduction idea or bullet point, then that's a good move.
Yeah. 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 Um, okay.
And I think using the word language is also helpful because there's obviously a language for film. Like there's very much how this story is told. Like it's an actual language, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And the same way that you do with literature, there's techniques and
Yeah. I think keeping the focus on storytelling is a really good thing,
mhm,
just to emphasize like your the methods of storytelling are
mhm,
different in film than they are in text. Um, and this is where we were going to illustrate with some of our very specific things, like the introduction of Lizzie. Sorry,
mhm.
the introduction of Lydia, rather.
Lydia.
Um, to use that as an illustration of like, let's look carefully at how Austen does this, right? What are the techniques she's using as a text storyteller, and a really good one, compared to how these two separate films are trying to accomplish a very similar thing, and what are the tools that they have at their disposal. We also This is where we're also talking about world building too, and yeah, this is okay. So there's stepping back a step or maybe two steps, thinking about categorically things that we need to, like big picture bullet points for episode
Mhm,
0. One of the other things that we need to do is kind of like acknowledgments or disclaimers.
mhm.
For instance, Pride and Prejudice was written over 200 years ago,
Yeah.
right? And it was a contemporary novel. Like she didn't have to do world building because it was their world.
Yep.
Whereas modern audiences of both of these films have to be reoriented
Sorry,
into
my typing is loud.
what's going on. That's all right. Um, uh, that's not something that I think we're going to be discussing constantly,
Mm-hmm.
but it's something that we should acknowledge at the
Yes.
beginning. That some of the differences in how things get approached are going to be historical because the audiences are different. The
Yeah.
the state of knowledge is different. Um, we can even here bring in potentially some of the differences between the BBC audience and the American movie audience, the American
Yeah.
cinema audience.
I've got a little point of like overview of the three works, and I think that's where we need to kind of hit those things. So, overview of the three works.
Hmm.
Let's start with the original text.
Yeah,
200 years ago, not a lot of world building. We need to acknowledge this element.
yeah.
Being able to just kind of do that with each of those. BBC miniseries,
Hmm.
British audience, expectation with BBC, known for adaptation, primer of British education, familiarity with the text, American Hollywood film,
Hmm.
big budget, art house,
Yes.
different perceptions, different expectations. Okay. I'm going to take off world building and put that back into overview of the three works.
Yes. Yeah, because the more I think about it, the more, especially, it's on the text side that there's the problem. So if we wanted to do a close comparison of how the world building is done in our three sources here, it's not really comparing apples to apples because both of the films are self-conscious. They're both period dramas, right? They are both self-consciously world building a historical world. which is remote from the experience of 100% of their viewers.
Mm-hmm.
Jane Austen was not undertaking that project. She didn't just undertake it differently. She didn't just have different, tools at her disposal. She was not undertaking it, right? We would have to compare the Jane Austen films compared to like Ivanhoe or something like that if we wanted to do a real comparison of that. Like there are, or like Howard Pyle or something like that. Like, like I'm thinking of like, 19th century stories that take place in the Middle Ages. Right.
Mm-hmm.
They were writing period novels, right?
Mm-hmm.
Period stories. Whereas Jane Austen was not doing that. She was writing a contemporary story. So yeah, I'd have a hard time. We could compare like the difference between how the two different films approach it differently. The world building, right? How they convey things to their viewers, and get the viewers in the proper frame of mind.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when we're talking about the two films here, I think in my mind, when I think about these two films, one of the biggest differences that I think is an audience difference is, and again, this is the kind of thing that, I mean, I know I've said this when we were discussing it before. This is the kind of thing that bothered both me and my wife more when we watched the Joe Wright film when it came out. Was it's not attempting to do. It is connecting with the contemporary audience more in spirit and attitude and outlook. The whole spirit of it is to let us connect ourselves, to help us to see ourselves in Lizzie Bennet, rather than taking us out of ourselves into and bringing us into a world that is alien to us.
And that bothered you.
It always does. This is why, like,
Interesting. Okay.
this is what I know what led my wife to watch that movie and say, that's not Jane Austen. That's not Elizabeth Bennet. Because she was like, Elizabeth Bennet would not act like that.
Right.
Right. The Bennets would not have livestock wandering through their home. Like, that is not right. That is not how it would be. And I get that. Like, she's right about that. And yet, that doesn't invalidate the project, right? It doesn't mean it's a bad film or a bad adaptation. It's trying to do something. Whereas again, the BBC one, like, it makes some concessions with the modern perspective, but the attitudes, the values,
the overarching,
it's historical. Like, you are aware that you are hearing the conversation of people who have different values than we. It's inviting you to leave your own, to not like connect it with your own experience and your own feelings in the same way. Not in, yes, you do, but not in the same way, right? But it's taking you out of your perspective. And do you see what I mean?
I do, yeah. I know, I completely see it. I just find it really interesting just listening to you, and I'm like, oh, but interesting how we are in Lizzie's perspective in that one, and we're an audience member watching from afar in the Joe
Yes,
Wright one.
it
So
is
it's trying to
interesting.
connect with us, but it has separated us, whereas the other one is not trying to connect with us and has brought us in.
Yes. Yes. It's like
Interesting.
by means of separation. Because again, like, we're looking straight at Lizzie, right?
Mm-hmm.
It wants us to be, we're not just a fly on the wall in the room, in a sense, right? We need to relate. Okay, wait, here's a more precise way to say it. We need to not, we don't relate. I'm trying to make a distinction between relating ourselves to the characters and relating the characters to ourselves. but I'm not sure exactly that it's a useful distinction at the end of the day. But it's
I see where you're going, though.
you see where I'm going? I mean, because
I do, yeah.
it's like I have to get out of my own, like I have to acknowledge that like there are things that people say in Jane Austen that I'm like, that wouldn't bother me. Like I have to enter into the world of Jane Austen to reel back in horror when somebody says something that everybody else considers rude and shocking. Right. And I'm like, if somebody said that at my family gathering, that wouldn't be shocking in any way. Right. But, and so the Joe Wright film is bringing it's bringing more of our sensibilities to that world instead of just bringing that world and putting it in front of us. Again, Eric, you like that? It's a good distinction. One changes the character, the other changes us. Yeah, that's because I do feel different when I'm reading a Jane Austen film. Like I have to, if I don't put myself there, like it's more work. If I don't put myself there, it's not even going to make sense.
Yeah, you're fighting against it the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. And early on in the Joe Wright film, there are clear indications that he is bringing that barrier down. And there are reasons to bring that barrier down. Again, this is not a an accusation I'm making,
no.
Right? This is the thing that bothers me with. This is the thing I have the hardest time getting over with Lizzie and Darcy at the first ball. Because how Elizabeth Bennet acts towards Mr. Darcy at the first ball would be anathema to Elizabeth Bennet in the book or in the BBC production. Like neither of them would ever act that way. It's how a modern person would. It's modern sensibilities.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But it's I'm trying to figure out how to talk about this as a general thing, how to lay the foundation for the difference in approach between these two films
and how to do it really concisely. Because, like the reason Corey and I do Other Minds and Hands is so we can kind of muse on all this stuff and and mosey around the topic and figure out how we feel about it.
We need to be able to present this in like a 2-minute.
Right. And I don't mean that as like a way to censor us. It's more of a challenge of how to be direct. So like, I would love people to listen to us muse for 2 hours about why it's important for the perspective to be this way, but they're not going to. So if we're able to kind of summarize that saying perspective is important or character interpretation is important and here's how it can be affected and here's a pro and a con of that. Like, I'm not trying to say this is good, that is bad. It's for us to take a look at it and said, Joe Wright had a more concise amount of time, tried to connect with an audience. The way that he seems to have gone about doing that is an actual connection with the viewer that makes them laugh and has a reaction that they understand. Whereas the BBC production, we have a more authentic understanding of what the character might have behaved in that time. So they're relying more on tradition. Like, there's ways that we can kind of talk about the techniques of these two presentations.
I think one useful way to talk about it is what they ask of the viewer. Like they're asking different things of the viewer. So one of the reasons I think this is important to talk about is that honestly, like discussing this stuff and thinking this stuff through is one of the things that has made, like actually doing that analysis has enormously assisted me in appreciating and respecting the Joe Wright adaptation. Because my reaction when I watch adaptations like that, adaptations which are lowering that barrier, adaptations which are shifting not the story exactly, not even necessarily the themes of the story, but shifting the sensibilities of the story, shifting the it's my first reaction is always like, oh, like this guy doesn't understand Jane Austen at all.
Right.
At all.
Right.
at all. This is not Jane Austen in any way. Like this is amateur hour. This is like ignorant Jane Austen. That's always my first reaction, because
And most people's first reaction.
yeah, often.
Yeah.
I mean, I think of that. I mean, and honestly, if I go back every single time I have watched a Jane Austen adaptation with my wife, the Jane Austen lover, and she hates it. That's always that's like the number one theme that binds together all of her least favorite Jane Austen adaptations. Like the Mansfield Park one, the sort of modernish one from the 90s, I think it was, the Mansfield Park.
Which I genuinely love, and I'm sorry, Bridget. She would like, but I love it because I understand it's not doing that.
Yeah.
You know, I love what it's accomplished, but not because it's a good adaptation of Mansfield Park for whatever that means. It's like,
do you remember the scene in that film where Fanny Price is like galloping her horse in the rain?
yes.
My wife and I literally both at the same time burst out laughing when that happened, because we were like, Fanny Price would have been dead in 30 seconds. That would have killed her dead had she tried doing that. Anyway, whatever. Anyway, so yeah, it's a major. But the whole point of what we're doing here in this first episode, right, is to draw attention to these things and acknowledge, like, let's not just have that visceral reaction, especially visceral reactions that we can't that we don't explain, right? That we don't like sit with. We just have the emotion, and then let that emotion guide us. And there may be other good reasons to say I dislike this as an adaptation, or I think that this is a poor adaptation, despite, other than those feelings. It's even possible, by the way, it's perfectly acceptable to say I don't like that feeling. Like, I'm going to avoid it. This is why, like, there was a recent Persuasion adaptation.
Yeah.
I still have never seen it.
I haven't seen
because my wife saw a preview of it and was like, oh no,
like,
no, I'm not even. Yeah.
That's what I mean. Like the same thing of like, I don't have to butt heads with certain people. There are certain adaptations I just don't need to engage with.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so it's fine. Like, I respect it. I'm not saying I'm going to like convince my wife to like the Joe Wright film, but I think it's really important to address this, to make sure, because the best thing that we can do, it's not that we're in the business of trying to like counsel people through their emotions. It's not that we're in the business of trying to like chastise people for their emotions
or convince them of anything.
Right.
Or not what we're here for. Yeah.
But what we do want to do is draw attention to, like, this might be a reason why you're having this emotion. Right.
Yes.
And this is a thing that's definitely going to, so change is one thing that causes emotion. That's not what he said, is one thing that causes emotion. This, in a period piece, in a historical piece, this is one of those things that causes emotion. And so really drawing attention to that. Again, I don't know that this is something, well, it will, because this is something that will definitely come up, because it's gonna come up in the second episode when we talk about the ball, right? The first ball and the meeting with Mr. Darcy. And so just sort of being able to establish that and not have to go back and have this conversation every time that happens, right? It will make the discussion, it'll make the analysis of Lizzie and Darcy's conversation so much easier, because we'll be like, so here's that phenomenon we've seen again, right? So, but acknowledging that phenomenon, now we can set it aside and just look at the thing that they're doing, instead of having it be an obstacle every single time it happens. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
This is good.
That's good.
We're getting a structure.
We're getting there. Yeah, we're getting a structure. How much we spent some time talking about expectations, audience expectations as well. There's a lot of really interesting stuff to be said here, but I feel most of it is kind of tangential, actually, if I'm totally honest about it. What people are expecting to get. It's hard because the way in which a work of art interacts with the expectations that it arouses is a really interesting thing to talk about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the moment when a play breaks the fourth wall, right?
Yeah.
Or a film breaks the fourth wall. Um, or, metaphorically speaking, a book could break the fourth wall too. I think of Fielding.
Princess Bride.
Well, The Princess Bride. No, I'm thinking
Princess
of,
Bride.
well, no, sort of. That's a frame. No, sorry. What I'm thinking of, literally breaking the fourth wall. Clearest example I can think of is Henry Fielding's novel Tom Jones, which, again, it is one of the great testaments to British culture that one of the first novelists of all time was already writing satires of novels. Like, the first novel ever written was a novel, and the second novel ever written was a satire of that novel. Like, come on. Anyway, Fielding wrote Tom Jones, and in Tom Jones he writes like chapter 34, and then he writes like a one sentence preview, like, in which Tom leaves town and
Mm-hmm.
goes to an inn. And he tends to use the word containing, like the chapter, he's like, containing Tom's adventures at the inn.
Right.
And then there's the one chapter in which he says, containing 4 pieces of paper. That's breaking the fourth wall.
That's breaking the fourth wall.
Or when Lawrence Stearns in Tristram Shandy includes a marbled page that is part of the story. Anyway.
But it's a good example, though. It's like, I'm speaking directly to the reader because I know
Yeah.
you have this book in your
You
hand.
have this book in your hand. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes. Reader, I Married Him is another example. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. When the narrator speaks directly to the reader in Jane Eyre. Yeah. That's also that is another example too. When the narrator acknowledges that the reader is
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Tangent. But how did I get on that topic? I know there were reasons.
I genuinely don't remember.
Expectations,
I'm like
interaction with expectations. That was it. Audience expectations. How an author, how a creator, a sub-creator interacts with the expectations of their audience is always really fascinating. However, I don't think it's going to be compellingly relevant to most of what we talk about. Like, it'd be a really interesting study to look at, like, Jane Austen and, by a lady writer, right? It being the only tagline in the front, on the title page. Her name is not named, but the fact that she's a woman, right? Is important. And because of expectations that it's building. And then the ways in which she's interacting with those expectations. But I don't think...
I think there's a certain amount of, like, just basic information that is contextually helpful. So, like, outlining that, yeah, like, what do we know about the text? Written 200 years ago, don't have to do a lot of world building, didn't even have the author's name on it, just had this one line. Like, all of that is really interesting just to kind of understand context.
Yes.
And that helps lay the scene for the next one. Now
Yes.
we have 200 years of loving this text and multiple adaptations. We can list, there have been, I think there were like 7 or 8 before the BBC one, right? So being able to say it was fodder for adaptations early on, people have been attached to the story. This is where we're coming in 1995. Just
Yes.
setting that where we are in the world when this comes out is really helpful. We just don't need to go into all that, I suppose, just yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So I think we don't spend much time on it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And I don't mind, I don't want to like gloss over stuff because I don't want to just put up a slide with a list of things.
yeah.
But I don't have a problem with just briefly acknowledging multiple things. So like we can pop up a list, but we would talk through here are some things that might have affected, but the main point is world building. The main point is audience reception or whatever it is that we're kind of
Yeah.
focusing in on. And here are some things that could affect it. So people are just starting to kind of understand there's a lot of factors at play.
Yeah. I think we, I think we, I think we want to begin. Well, we haven't really put on here much. Yeah. I'm more along the lines, actually. We need to introduce who we are and why we're doing this.
Yes. Did you see my last line?
Right.
I
Yeah.
just typed our intentions.
Yeah. We need to, and also in the context of that, also talk about something as simple as like, what is an adaptation? Like, what is adaptation, and why do we care? What's interesting about that? Um, what what do we feel? Because I mean, I kind of want to explain to people why we think this is important, like why we think this is interesting, what's valuable about this. The thing that's valuable about this is not just that it's not a. This is the main thing that I try to say to people, and I don't know if I ever really fully succeed about this. But the thing that's to me really, really interesting, like the reward of discussing adaptations, is not even primarily appreciating the art of the adaptations better, though I do that, and that is a good thing. But for me, it's understanding the original better. How much my understanding of the original is enriched when you look at these things, right?
That's a really nice perspective for a professor of literature. Like, of course, that's going to bring you back to the original source
Yes,
material. And you get, I feel like I go from a slightly simpler side of it. I love studying adaptation so much because it removes the negative emotion.
right,
The more I engage with the study of adaptation, the more I enjoy all of the art.
right,
And it's kind of, we're kind of saying the same thing in different roads.
right.
Like the example I often give is The Help, which is a book a couple years ago, Emma Stone, and I saw the film first and I loved it. And my sister had read the book first and hated the film because it was so different.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved both, and that was okay. And then you start to, do more research about different things and pull it all apart, and you're allowed to love all of it.
Right,
So
right.
being able to discuss it and say, well, it's really interesting that they made that decision. I get to love all of it. Whereas if
Exactly.
you close the door because she rode a horse and there's no way that would ever happen, then you're not giving yourself a chance to have fun for the next 2 hours.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. No,
Bridget, I'm
exactly.
not saying you're wrong.
She
I'm just
no,
saying
she's
I
yeah,
like being open to the option. That being said, there's loads of things that I'll go see and be like, no, but I don't even have to engage with that. I don't have to engage with that. That is the choice I get to make.
yes,
Does
exactly,
not change the original source material.
exactly.
All right, I'm going to wrap us up too because you
Yes,
are
yes, we do
also
have to go.
needing
So
sleep.
now, but I think we're getting towards
This is good.
an outline here.
Yeah.
Can we try to refine this into actual script
Yeah.
notes that we could run with
Like if
for
we
next
can
time?
get to the stage by next week where we actually have like bullet points as if we were going to Studio Lab,
Yeah.
that's enough for you and I to actually like flesh out and talk through.
Yes.
And then the next episode I bet we could record.
Yep. It's true. Bet we can.
And look at calendars, are we okay for the next 2 weeks? I think I am.
Well, next week, yes, the week after, the 17th, is I will have just come home from Ranger Moot, but I should be home. I think I'll be okay. Thanksgiving
That's
week
fine.
is the
So you just
24th.
let me know.
Okay, I think the next 2 weeks are okay.
I probably cannot do December 1st, but other than that,
Okay,
that's
I
about it.
definitely can't do December 1st. So
Oh, great.
it's
No
so
December
lovely when
1st.
our travel winds up like that.
Isn't it nice? But then I'm going to be in your time zone for like 6 weeks because I'll be in New Hampshire all of December
Right,
and a week of January.
right.
So watch the space. We'll be at the studio at
We
some
could
point together.
literally film something. We could literally take
Oh
our
yeah,
studio lab. Yeah.
that's already in your calendar. I don't know if you've seen it or not. First week of January, clear it.
Right, right. Yeah. Awesome.
Fab.
Okay, very good.
Go team.
That was good. Now this is it's
Yay.
good to get back into this and to have
It is.
some clarity about this, and we'll move forward and we'll build that first episode.
Awesome. And thanks to Karen for being our note taker for
Yes,
this.
thank you, Karen. Really
So
appreciate it.
grateful.
Excellent. And before I go, let me just say, before I totally
Oh
forget,
yes.
we are in the middle of our fall fundraising campaign for Signum University. So I would just encourage you, if you have been enjoying and appreciating Other Minds and Hands, you can directly support our show and Signum Studios and everything that we do by donating to Signum University. signumuniversity.org/donate is the mechanism for making your donation, your tax deductible in America donation to Signum University. So thank you so much, everybody. And we will see you guys again next week. Bye now.
Thanks, gang.